Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montevilla Sewing Center, and today we're talking about the Juki DX-2000 QVP. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started sewing on your machine. So to start with, when you first turn on your machine, it is in this category, which if you look up here, these stitches are available with a single push of the button. So if I want to do zigzag, for instance, just go right there and I'm right into zigzag. I can make the zigzag wider or narrower, shorter or longer. And if I want to go back to the default for that zigzag, just push that button again. So whatever picture you see here, you just need to do one button push to get directly to that. It'll also tell you up here what foot to use. Like for instance, if I'm going to do buttonholes, it would tell me to use the E foot right there. Okay, I'm going to go back to regular old straight stitching. And to do straight stitching, you want to use your, I think this is the A foot. Yeah, that's the A foot. It says A right on there. Now, what is this little knob for? I'm going to show you what that's for. So, a little higher. There we go. Now, notice the presser lifter wasn't working right away. That's because the last time I used it, I used this here. Presser lifter didn't work to put it down, so I lift a little bit higher, and now it will work. Another way to do this is if your presser foot's up, you can use your knee lifter and put your presser foot down that way. You can also use this button here. Now, this button means when I use this, I have to take my eyes away from here, look up here. I can use my knee lifter this way or just my hands back here. So it depends on your preference, whichever way you want to do it. So let's start out with this up. Okay, so the little knob, that is for if you're doing jeans and you're doing like the hem-on jeans, see how thick that is? So if I was going across this, my foot, my presser foot, would kind of tip up and it kind of get bogged down right there. So what I do is I do a single needle down, lift up my presser foot, push down a little bit on the toes until I could push that knob all the way in. That levels out the foot so I can sew across that thick seam. Now, I'm using this, my example here, so I don't want to actually sew it, because then I'd have to rip it out. But that's how it levels that out and helps it go across that thick seam. That's what the little knob is for. And once it's done, needing to use that, pressure on the front of the foot is no longer there and it pops back out. Okay, but why would you want to even use that? Well, that's because this rocks so it can get up and down over uneven surfaces. Sometimes it's too uneven, and that's why you would want to put that there to counter that. Okay, so regular sewing. Let's say you want to do a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Well, here is your 5/8 inch line, right there. Put your presser foot down, and now you can start sewing. Do a back stitch. Now I have this on kind of a slower speed, and then you can do a back stitch again. Now this time, I didn't even really need to hold my foot down on the foot control. I'm going to go forward a little bit. At this point, I could do needle up, lift up my presser foot, cut my thread this way. But you can also use the cutter button. So I'm going to show you how that works. Let's just sew a little bit here. Whoop, okay. I can tell right now I have a problem. Probably because, okay, threads are moving nice and evenly. So what I think I did is I didn't hold my thread. Now this is a good lesson for you here. When you start sewing, hang on to that beginning thread. And you don't need to hold it like a rope, just kind of give it a little bit of pressure. That'll keep it from being pulled down inside the machine. Let's see how we go here. Okay, got a little problem here. You know what? Sometimes if you have a problem with your machine, you could take it all apart, but sometimes simply unthreading and rethreading is all you need to do to solve that problem. So this is a getting started thing too. I'm going to unthread. I'm going to actually take it through. Everything sounds good. So I'm going to go needle down, needle up. In order for this to work, you need to have your presser foot down. Okay, so good to go. Rethread. And notice I gave that a little bit of a pull coming through there. That's on my threading video. I'm up here like this. Quick needle thread like that. That was really fast, and it gave me just barely a little loop of thread. There we go. Put this in here. Around like that. Put the cover on. And there we go. Okay. Make sure the thread is under the presser foot. Okay. I can see. There we go. Okay, so if I'm at the end of my stitching and I want to cut my thread, make sure that you're not off the edge of your fabric or that you haven't started sewing. So I'm at the end of my sewing. So now I notice the needle's down. Watch what happens when I push this button. Cuts the thread, it lifts up the foot and it lifts up the needle, and you can just pull it right out like that. It leaves these little thread tails which you can snip off or you can leave them if they're on the inside of your garment. So now that is this button here. This one here does a little knot at the beginning, at the end. So I'm going to go press your foot down. If I push this, I'm just pushing it, and I didn't have to put it on my foot control. I can just start sewing. Now notice another thing here. When it comes to a stop, see how it lifts up the foot a little bit? That way you can take a look at your stitches, make sure everything looks the way you want it to. You don't need to do any adjustments. You can also turn off this foot up feature in the settings, but that's why it lifts up a little bit like that. And then you can do a locking stitch at the end, and then you can do your cutter like that. There we go. Okay, so that's your basic sewing, and also what happens if you get a little thread tangle. And then, if we're going to do a zigzag, so for this kind of fabric, you want to seal this so that if you wash this, you're not going to get some fraying happening. So what we can do is go like this, lift it up a little bit, and put it down, and then do my zigzag. Okay, that's kind of a narrow zigzag. I want to make it a little bit wider so it catches a little bit more of the fabric. There we go. Now, say I'm going to use my cutter button. I don't want to use it with the needle off the fabric. I want to take one more stitch so it's going to be into the fabric. Now I use my cutter button because the cutter needs to have, the thread trimmer needs to have a little fabric to pull against. Okay, that's not too bad. Sometimes it scrunches up the edge of your fabric. I'm going to give you an example of that. Put that out of the way like this. There we go. Let's go right up here. You can make a nice wide, 7mm wide zigzag. There we go. I can speed this up a little bit if I want to. There we go. Okay. Actually, I'm going to just go needle up and take that out of there because there's different ways of doing this. That kind of scrunched up the edge of the fabric. So how do we do that, especially on fine fabrics, to get a nice even edge that doesn't scrunch it up like that? This is the foot you would use. Now when you do your zigzag with this is the default for that. See that little bar there? You want to make sure that your needle is going to not hit that bar. So right now, I'm going to show you, see how it hits that bar? Make sure this is at the widest. Just go right on up to 7 there. And then this guide is what you put the edge of your fabric next to in order to do a nice even zigzag. I'm going to hold my threads. Started here. There we go. Now where you should be watching is right here with the edge of the fabric right next to that guide there. That's what you need to be looking at to make sure that it doesn't move away or under or kind of bubble up next to it. So take your time. If you're afraid that you're going to go too fast, slow it down. Get to know your machine. Now, at the end of this, if you want to do a locking stitch, you can do a locking stitch, but again, make sure that the locking stitch is going to be sewing into the fabric. So at this point, I'd make my locking stitch like that, not off the edge of the fabric. Now, I can cut my threads, lift up the foot, but notice how those last stitches are kind of hanging onto that. Just slide it towards the back and it comes right off. Look how nice and flat that is compared to this here. That's the overcasting foot, and that is foot letter C. So that's your basic getting started. You can actually do quite a bit with your machine. Look at my other videos that I have. It'll be really helpful, but at least this will get you started, and you can get started sewing garments in your favorite patterns that you've been looking forward to sewing. If this video has been helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you have comments or questions, you can leave those in the area down below. Also, we have a lot of other videos on our YouTube channel here, so thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Bye.